Your Holiness, Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople, I address you in the name of the numerous and much-suffering flock and clergy, monastics and laity of the Cherkasy diocese of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Do not regard my direct appeal to you as any audacity or breach of ecclesiastical etiquette or protocol. I have two weighty grounds for doing this. The first is that, long before the events associated with the granting of the Tomos to the OCU, Orthodox Church of Ukraine, when we served together and conversed in the old monastery of Panagia and had extended discussions on the Fanar, you yourself granted me the right to speak with you directly about the problems of orthodoxy in Ukraine. I would sin before God and before people if I were now to refuse to use that right. The second ground is the tragic circumstances into which my diocese and all orthodoxy in Ukraine has now fallen. The Cherkasy diocese, which I shepherd, is one of the most grievously wounded dioceses of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. It has suffered at the hands, in the words of the Gospel, of thieves and robbers from the so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine, who did not enter by the door into the church enclosure, but climbed in another way. They did this by your decision, Your Holiness. And now, like thieves and robbers, they exploit the vineyard of Christ. They beat and wound the servants of the true owner, Christ. They divide his children's garments amongst themselves. They overturn the baskets and trample the grapes. For their crimes in Cherkasy, the representatives of the OCU have not been punished. And to this day, their villainies have not received the moral censure they deserve from your side, Your Holiness. Though here in Ukraine, we all have awaited that. Recently, you gave an interview to French television. It coincided with a visit to my episcopal city, Cherkasy, by the leader of the OCU created with your blessing, Epiphanius Dumenko. He performed his ritual in my cathedral church in Cherkasy. Unlawfully, I do not dare to call it a service, in the cathedral which was seized less than a year ago by armed men. The blood of monks and priests has not yet finished drying on the slabs of the cathedral. The wounds on the bodies of Cherkasy's confessors of the faith have not yet healed. And yet Mr. Dumenko already came into another's cathedral and unlawfully ascended my cathedral. He performed his ritual using liturgical vessels that were stolen from us, including the chalice which was given personally to me many years ago by spiritual children upon my episcopal consecration. He was assisted by servants of the OCU wearing liturgical vestments taken from us by force, and on the gallery of the cathedral at the same time, icons of saints were thrown into a heap by adherents of the OCU, who on political grounds do not consider them saints. The largest Orthodox temple in Ukraine, the Archangel Michael Cathedral in Cherkasy, was seized by supporters of Epiphanius in October of last year. During the seizure, priests, monks, and laity were maimed. They were exposed to tear gas. Their arms, legs, teeth, and heads were broken. Inside the cathedral, they were shot at. My own robe was torn to shreds. My staff was broken, and then I was struck with a baton on the head with such force that I suffered a concussion. Only my monastic klobuk saved me from certain death, softening the blow. Not long before the blow and before the concussion, I had managed to reach out to you, Your Holiness, from the altar besieged by terrorists, in which we sat as hostages. I am sure that you saw that appeal. The corrupt bodies of police, prosecutors, and other security services have still not given, and apparently are not going to give, a proper assessment of these crimes committed by representatives of the OCU. And this despite the fact that the Archangel Michael Cathedral in Cherkasy remains the property of the Cherkasy Diocese of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, of which I am the head. Yet the captors act by the law of force. The Constitution and laws of Ukraine are now almost inoperative. So it is not surprising that there is no reaction from the authorities or law enforcement agencies to these atrocities. But why, Your Holiness? Have you thus far not forbidden your subordinates in the OCU to carry out these evils? For you have full power over them, according to the tomos which you issued. You so often declare that the Ukrainian Orthodox people are in your heart. So why do you not stop these criminals? Why have you not uttered even a word of sympathy or support for the beaten and mutilated faithful people of Cherkasy, Chernivtsi, Ivano-Frankivsk, and other regions of Ukraine, if they are in your heart? Even the United Nations has already given proper recognition to the events in Cherkasy, condemning these crimes on religious grounds and calling on the Ukrainian authorities to respond immediately. In an official document, the UN Special Rapporteurs drew attention to the forceful seizure of the cathedral in Cherkasy and the violent assault of its defenders, including myself. The UN called for these crimes to be investigated immediately. Yet from you, we have heard no word of sympathy or support. In the interview with French television, you said that you do not regret the creation of the so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine, and very wrongly, do you not regret it? In a very similar situation, our church was once afflicted after the October Revolution and state coup in the early 20th century, when the new Bolshevik regime organized persecutions against Christians. The church was persecuted in part by the hands of the newly formed pseudo-church of the Renovationists. Then, to the great sorrow, your predecessor on the patriarchal throne of Constantinople, Patriarch Gregory VII, took the side of the Renovationists, legalizing them. Patriarch Gregory did not only demand that Saint Patriarch Tikhon resign from his throne, but through his representative, Archimandrite Basil, blessed a false synod of schismatics. He sent a message with the words, "I am with you in absentia." That same representative of the Patriarchate was officially an honorary member of the Renovationist pseudo-synod and constantly took part in the sacrilegious services of the schismatics in the 1920s. Now, a century later, the situation is repeating almost with 100% alignment. The state power of Ukraine persecutes our church and does all in its power for its total destruction. The so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine, created with your direct participation, is directly involved. Then, in the 20th century, our people generously forgave your predecessor's betrayal of our church and cooperation with the communists in persecutions. Will our faithful people likewise forgive this time? That is a great question. For very much blood and suffering have been brought onto our land by the schismatics whom you set loose into the church, introduced without doors, without repentance, without lawful ordinations. Sent in another way, as the Holy Gospel says. And so it was very strange to hear your words that, after years or decades, unity between the OCU and our church might become possible. Believe me, that will not happen, because there can be no union of Christ with Belial. Therefore, your present unyielding position, expressed on French television, is very dangerous and destructive. It has every chance of becoming the trigger, the detonator, of a second great schism in the church. From personal conversation with you, I remember that you wished to be an active participant in healing the first great schism of the Church of 1054. But by fact, you, your holiness, may become the cause of a second great and irreversible schism of world orthodoxy. And if you do not realize that now, then in any case, your successors in the patriarchal throne will sooner or later come to do so. Whether they will succeed in clearing up these Augean stables is unknown, but it will certainly stain the memory of your name in church history. Today, given the manifest unlawfulness of the OCU, you, your holiness, have all moral and canonical grounds to put a limit to them and to end the persecution of the church in Ukraine. You have now not only many reasons, but all levers of influence to correct this tragic mistake, for its fruits are already obvious to the entire oikoumene. Yes, to change one's decisions is not easy even for an ordinary person, let alone for a hierarch in your esteemed position and venerable age. But could a certain personal honor, or even the honor of the see which you preside over, become for you something placed above the actual salvation of world orthodoxy from a new great schism? Could personal honor become an obstacle for you to stop the sufferings of millions of Orthodox Christians in Ukraine? It is impossible to believe. One does not wish to believe. Your Holiness, the faithful of Ukraine will not believe it as long as you live. They, shedding their confessors' blood, will continue to hope that the Lord will grant you a change of mind and a change of decision. For we are now undergoing real persecutions from the godless authority in Ukraine and its faithful servants, the so-called clerics of the OCU. Of course, to remedy the situation, it would not suffice simply to revoke the tomos you issued for the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. Most important to calm the unrest in world orthodoxy, to reconcile the hierarchs of the different lands, and to heal the beginning of a new grave schism, is the annulment of your legalization of the Ukrainian schismatics. They must bring repentance for the sin of schism. Only then can the matter of lawful ordinations for them be raised. And these questions in no way can be resolved without the participation of the lawful Kyriarchical Church for Ukrainian Orthodoxy, the Russian Orthodox Church, regardless of all the political problems of our day. And this, in turn, is impossible without your renouncement of the foreign to the spirit of church conciliarity, teaching about the first without equals, which you first openly proclaimed personally on French television. Yet all this is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, canonical order and justice will remain unrestored in world orthodoxy. And so the bloody wound of a new schism will not be healed, and the year 2019 will remain for the Church a tragic turning point, just as 1054 was in its time. We place hope, Your Holiness, in your wisdom and your capacity to humble yourself before God's ways, which are so evidently opening today for the whole Orthodox world through the confessors' struggle of the church martyr, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Opening also through the anti-Christian behavior and malice of the artificially created OCU. Today in your hands lie not only the peaceful future of the oikoumene, but also the potential irreversible schism of world orthodoxy. We implore you, do not commit a fatal error, Your Holiness.